Alright, hey everybody. So, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about Revulsion and what I plan to do for the Friday patch. I'm thinking that the patch is going to be Friday. I've been pretty busy lately setting up other things, which does actually involve Revulsion, at least in a minor way. I have a D Live channel that I'll be broadcasting, and there'll be I'll be putting in ads for my own content, within my VR chat content as well. So but so I've been doing a lot of video editing. I've been doing a lot of stuff. So I've been pretty distracted. Now, BZPlasma had a chance to experience
It
Revulsion.
feels like you should be able to, but you just bounce off like it's slippery. You bounce off like covered in grease.
So he did not have a good time with the game, or at least in my experience, he ended up getting pretty frustrated with it after at a certain point, and it brought up a really good, a really solid point about the game and things about and things in general is that there's actually a really bad feedback loop that exists within the game, and I'm gonna do a pretty big change. I'm gonna make a pretty big change regarding this situation. So I want to see if I can actually alleviate this feedback loop. So the feedback loop that I've noticed is that the death penalty doesn't really make the game harder. It just makes it more tedious, and that's essentially what I've noticed. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about how Revulsion is not actually really that hard. I think it's both a tedious and hard game. It includes grind. There is a bit more tedium. It's definitely more grindy than regular Doom, or Quake 2. It's a looter shooter that's designed around the idea of you constantly keeping your character's gear as up to date as possible and making sure that you keep every slot, uh, you know, up to date for as much as you possibly can, for as long as you possibly can. So there is that entire aspect is kind of a core facet of how the game functions as a whole. So, but the combat with the enemies is still pretty rough. At the same time, it's not. And I know a lot of people will be like, "Oh well, Doom's not hard." I think that that's untrue. It's very similar to Doom in a lot of ways when it comes to the difficulty and stuff like that, the number of enemies that you do eventually run into, and a lot of occasions and stuff like that. It's not it's a slower paced. It's sort of it's a little bit more grindy. There's a little bit more of that kind of aspect to it. I mean, that's kind of just how the game is. That's the DNA of the game. Which I'm not trying to make excuses. It's just that's kind of a little bit of that. But there's definitely things I can do to alleviate this, and I have a feeling that the death penalty is one of the main problems. So I think the main catalyst for BZ to have a poor experience with the game definitely stemmed from the fact that he would die, he would lose all of his stuff, he would gain no feeling of progression because he lost all of his stuff. He would end up fighting harder monsters because he'd progress into the next area with harder monsters, and then the monsters would just start feeling spongy, and then he would start to feel like he's too weak to be able to do anything about it, and then the monsters would kill him even more, and then he would not have a feeling of progress because he lost his stuff, and then this would just continue on until eventually he just got too angry. So here's one of the things that's actually this is really important to point out, and I'm definitely going to be revisiting this. I'm thinking of actually removing the death penalty from at least the normal mode of the game and taking the easy mode hat out altogether. Now that's a couple of things right there. Now the easy mode hat is being taken out because if there's no death penalty, then there's you're not going to be running into the problems that the easy mode hat kind of alleviates, but doesn't. See, that nasty feedback loop still exists even with the easy mode hat. It's just reduced greatly so that it takes longer for that feedback loop to actually occur. So what we're dealing with here is a situation where I just need to get rid of that feedback loop. I think that that's a necessary aspect. So as of next patch, the death penalty will be removed. Now, what I might do is I still plan to have like a hard mode for the game, which would be the class I've mentioned it before, the depraved class, right, or deprived class. It would be a class where when you play that on that mode, your stats start off a lot lower by default, and it require you're a lot more gear centric, and maybe in that mode, that mode is even supposed to have like durability on your guns and shit. Like his guns would be breaking. Like it's just a punishing, super like tedious mode, and that's the like that could be like an optional side thing, and the death penalty could continue on from there. Now, here's one of the things that's really interesting about the death penalty in Revulsion versus the death penalty, because the death penalty was taken literally right out of Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a game where you don't actually need to level up, though. That's a key aspect. You can run around naked in Dark Souls, and you can fight the final boss while naked with a fucking short sword. If you know what you're doing, you can do it. Good fucking luck doing that in Revulsion. You'll never be able to do that in Revulsion. You need all of your gear to be constantly upgraded. You need to be in a constant, loop of gaining things. The death penalty ruins that. It doesn't actually fit Revulsion, even though it's trying to do that same sort of aspect. So I'm gonna probably make the depraved character class where it has the death penalty, and the death penalty won't exist for other classes. So if somebody wants to subject himself to that possible, that potential feedback loop where they lose their shit when they die and stuff like that, that can be an option for them on the side, right? Now I know that the easy mode hat it kind of exists as well, and the easy mode hat is sort of like one of those things where it's like I've noticed this as where they simply do not, even players who are like horror bad will simply not put the hat on. They just don't want a hat. They feel like the hat is insulting, and they just won't put it on. They won't accept that they need to get good. They just get mad that the game is too hard or too tedious or whatever they decide to say. Like, which is fine, I guess. The thing is, though, is that the easy mode hat causing this situation isn't really an ideal thing, and especially the fact that after you die too many times, I try to suggest, hey, maybe you should just put the hat on. You're dying like crazy. Stop dying. That's not going to give the player a good feeling. That's not happy thoughts. You know what I mean? That's not like a good feedback loop. And then it's like, well, maybe you should just use the easy mode hat. I'm just balancing the game around, depending on you to do that instead, and it just doesn't work. It's just not. It's just one of those things where it just simply does not work. Um, and that's really about it. So there are other things I'm going to include in the next patch. I'll be nerfing the recall ability so that you actually have to activate it manually. That was a request by Sumo Wish because he's trying to do a zero death run, and during a zero death run, there's no reason to. I mean, use anything other than the recall thing because the recall thing is essentially a get out of jail free card, and you can die over and over again with zero penalties if you really want. So if you make it so that it doesn't automatically activate on death, then you should be fine. Now, there's a lot of um, there's a lot of other things that came up, but I think that most of BZPlasma's complaints actually stemmed because of this feedback loop. Once you die, you lose your shit. You don't have a feeling of progress. You die again because you end up fighting stronger monsters. End up feeling like the game just has lots of spongy monsters. And then you just end up, everything's too expensive. I can't, I don't have any items. I don't, what do I do? Like, do I try to sell everything? Do I, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have anything. You never feel like you have any gear. And then the monsters just keep getting stronger, which means that they hit you harder, and then you you deal less damage to them because you're carrying around like level 1 guns. And I mean, look, you're seeing it right here. Like, um, and then there's really nothing you can do about it. Like, if he had not been losing his credits on death, he only died one time here. But if he didn't, he probably would have picked up one of those auto pistols that were green, and then that would have been like, the auto pistol is like so much better and just does like massive damage compared to the other guns that he's got because they're level 1. The fall off in damage from a gun that's like one level less than the monster is like, I believe it's anywhere between 10 and 20% damage reduction, or at least it takes that much more shots to kill something. It's a pretty big difference. So if your gun is like 4 levels lower than the monster, holy crap, you're fighting it with a pea shooter. So yeah, there's there that entire aspect is definitely a thing. Like those monsters should have died in 2 hits, but they simply didn't because the weapon was very low, and those were level 3 monsters. Like they would take 3 shots to kill, and then that matters a lot in the grand scheme of things, especially when you're dealing with minigunners. So with that said, the next patch this week, I'm going to be taking a good look at a lot of stuff. Not just that, I'll probably come up with some other aspects, for feedback and things of that nature. In terms of the tedium of the game versus the challenge, I think that a lot of people, I think it makes a lot of sense at this point in time to give it a shot where I sort of roll the easy mode in to the regular mode a little bit in some aspects and try and alleviate this negative feedback loop. And I think it's really not even so much about just making the game easier, but really alleviating problems with the game that um, I don't know, just alleviating problems with the game in general in terms of a design aspect, because it definitely isn't the same thing as Dark Souls. A game like Dark Souls, you lose your souls. You can still beat the game with your character. You just need to get better at the game, right? That's not how Revulsion works. Revulsion is a loot grind game, so they're not really that similar, actually. They're similar in terms of like, everything respawns in the level when you use a fast travel and stuff like that. So they're kind of like bonfires, and the death penalty kind of works the same way as that, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So with that said, also too, I've never seen this guy do this. I've never seen the chain gunner break like that. In all of my hours playing the game, how the fuck did this happen? Just when somebody's streaming the game, does this actually occur? What the fucking? God damn it! I've never seen this before. What the fuck? I've never. I have tons of footage of playing the game, and many. I don't even know how he broke. What the fuck was that? Okay. Well, anyway, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna get this video out, so let you guys know that patch is coming on the end of the week. I have been pretty distracted, and it's not totally unrelated. The distraction isn't 100% unrelated. I am trying to build up a social media presence as far as streaming and my decentralized like content creation and things of that nature. So I just think it's a really good idea to do that. I think that it makes a lot of sense, not just in terms of my game development, but in terms of just having an audience. Because I think that if I had an audience right away, if I had a presence where people were already kind of fans of my antics, at least in VR chat or things of that nature, I would still have there would be more eyes, there would be more people seeing what I do. I think it's necessary. It's also fun. It's very fun. And it's just something that I need to try and get in place and have. I need to have like a streaming career. I think I need to have a something on the side in order to be able to survive in the indie game scene. So that is definitely something that I am working on and everything like that. And Okay, so with all that said, all right, I'm definitely looking at the feedback that I got from BZPlasma. My take on all of the feedback, or at least most of it, is that if I alleviate the death penalty feedback loop, that should address 90%, or at least maybe 70. Let's be let's be realistic. It's probably about 75% of the complaint that he had with the game. So, which I think would be huge. Like if he didn't have that 75% of the complaint of the game, he might have just kept playing. He might have just enjoyed it and kept gaining stuff and maybe he had like complaints about like the auto map not allowing you to zoom in and stuff like that. And those are all things that I could definitely look at. I do have the ability right now to continue working on Revulsion. I'm not really making a whole lot of profit at the moment because there's just so few people who even know that the game even exists. You know what I mean? So it's one of those situations where it's like, somebody might think that I'm like blowing off feedback. It's not so much that. It's just that it's difficult when there's no money coming in from something to just keep going with it. Am I just throwing everything into a hole, or what am I doing here? But I think in this particular case, this is something that maybe just needed to be fixed from the fucking start. Like it just maybe the game needed to be this way, and that was something that BZ Plasma actually mentioned. He said he said that if I had come to him, with earlier versions of the game, I really seriously had no idea that this was even possible. He would have checked it out and been able to go over each of the patches and give me feedback, and perhaps we probably would have diffused this entire situation from the get go. Because honestly, the more whoever is giving me feedback for the game ends up having a lot of power in terms of like what happens with the development of the game. I definitely take the feedback that I get pretty seriously, and I definitely do make changes based on that kind of feedback. I definitely do listen. So I had no idea because it's something that's really interesting about this entire experience has been that it's just um, it's very hard to get anyone interested in something. Um, that's been my experience thus far. Maybe the game just needed to look better. Maybe if it looked cool, maybe if it looked more like Proteus, I would have had people, giving feedback right away and things of that nature. And I probably, the art style might have just turned people away. Revulsion's kind of a game that's a little bit more substance over style, if you will. Not to try to like say that it's substance is like super over the top or anything like that, but it's kind of one of those things where I mean, the graphics are not cutting edge here. It doesn't look like a modern shooter for in any way, shape, or form. Hell, it doesn't even look like Proteus. Yeah, if you guys don't know what Proteus is, definitely should check that out. Definitely along the the same lines of a game of this nature. But Revulsion is more like it's just a different take. It's a different angle on a lot of the same stuff. Hell, the looter shooter meets Doom style aspect is definitely an interesting, should be an interesting experience. So with that said, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to address the easy mode hat. I'm going to address the death penalty. I'm going to address the recall ability, and I'll see if I can have all of that done for a patch on Friday, and then I'll approach BZ Plasma again. Like I had no idea. I literally had zero idea that he would actually take a look at the game before. I don't know. Did I even try? I tried to get people to look at it, but nobody really gave feedback. The only person, honestly, who gave me like a huge amount of feedback for the game was Sumo Wish because well, Sumo Wish actually pulled the game apart, and he got all the way to level 100, and he basically made the game look easy. He just took in every aspect of it. He grinded, he did the things, and then you know what I mean. And I very much appreciate that. I didn't get the other side of the feedback. It's like, is this game for normal people? And I guess in some respects, it's not really supposed to be totally mainstream. It's kind of meant to be a little bit more of a punishing game, sort of in the same lines of Dark Souls and things of that nature. So, with that said, I guess what I'm gonna have to do is just take a look at these things, provide feedback, or see if I can get more feedback provided, uh, and then I'll address other issues that come up as a result of the death penalty. There'll be some things that pop up for sure. For example, it'll probably be very possible to have too much stuff, if that makes any sense. Now, I could deal with that problem. I'd rather deal with a problem like that than a problem like, oh, I have nothing and I keep dying and the monsters are spongy and blah blah blah, right? The way the game is actually balanced is that if your gear is at your level, the monsters will never be spongy unless the monsters are over your level. Um, okay, so with that said, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna end this now. There will be some changes coming up, and hope you enjoyed. Definitely stay tuned for more. I'll have any feedback or any. I'll have another video maybe coming out on Friday to kind of talk things over. So yeah, I guess that's that.